Hi everybody, Randy Wakeman here, 2 weeks before pheasant season. I've had a lot of fun with 20 gauges over the years. So what I'd like to do today is do a brief comparison of 4 different 20 gauges. 2 synthetic, 2 walnut, 3 inertia guns, 1 over and under. So we'll see how they shoot, we'll see how they feel, and I'll make whatever comments come to mind. For starters, I'm going to use a pretty popular load, target load. Federal Top Gun, 1210 foot per second, 7/8 ounce load. Very, very common target load. So, we've got 4 guns. We have a Benelli M2. We've got a Fabarm Elos D2 with an alloy receiver. Weatherby Sorax 20 gauge, and a Weatherby 18i Deluxe Walnut. So we'll go down the line. First up is a Benelli M2. This model has the old ComfortTech stock, as you can see, and a 24-inch barrel. Now, I have had to make some modifications. The center bead was far larger than the front bead on this gun, so there's no easy way to get it off. Perhaps heat it, use a pin vise. I snapped it off. Fortunately, it broke off nice and flush, and it's been that way for a long time. Originally, the trigger was way on the heavy side. It went back to Benelli, and they adjusted it. The loading was a real thumb buster. It was incredibly stiff. Benelli improved it. It's still on the stiff side, but usable. So we'll see how it cycles with 7/8 ounce loads. This has been, unfortunately, a Benelli clicker, and a lot of Benelli clicks come from just bad selection as far as the mainspring. So originally, even though this thing went back to Benelli, you could shake it up and down and the bolt would rattle like crazy. The bolt would come out of battery with essentially every step on hard ground. And if you're moving fairly quickly, following the dogs, hunting pheasants, a real problem. So that was replaced with a wolf spring, extra strength mainspring, which is not that easy to do because for whatever reason, they don't use service grade removable Loctite. They use permanent stuff like red Loctite 271 or the equivalent. So you need to heat it. Putting a smoke wrench to a mainspring tube is not my idea of a good time. I don't like it. So I had a gunsmith do it. So let's see how the revitalized, worked over Benelli M2 20 gauge does with these Federal target loads. And you can see ejection is adequate. It's not particularly aggressive, but reliable enough. As far as recoil, this is only a 6-pound gun. I think the ComfortTech stock on the older M2s actually does improve things somewhat, but this is the type of gun that's going to tire you out on the skeet field. I know. So, manageable recoil, but as a clays breaker, you're going to get tired shooting this thing pretty quick. But nevertheless, it passed with target loads. Now we're moving over to a Fabarm Elos D2, same loads. This is actually the lightest gun of the group. It's just a little under 6 pounds, maybe an ounce lighter than the Benelli. Pair of 26-inch barrels. So let's see how it shoots. We're not going to worry about a Benelli click with this, that's for sure. Fair enough. This gun, believe it or not, actually has less felt recoil to my shoulder than the Benelli. And I write that off to good stock design, but also a Pachmayr SC100 recoil pad, which Fabarm added for me, which is my favorite all-around recoil pad. It's snag-free. It's a fairly stiff durometer, so you don't get that instant collapse or excessive gun movement. But it helps out. Even though this is not a harsh shooter with target loads anyway, it's definitely an improvement. Shotgun number 3, Weatherby Sorax, 20 gauge. This is the Storm camo configuration, along with Cerakote. Comes with a 28-inch barrel. Shorter barrels are going to be available, but it doesn't sound like they're going to be available until next year. So as much as I really like this gun for chasing pheasants and things like that, I would like a 26 or a 24. I think a 24 is going to happen fairly quickly in time for turkey season, because this is the only one with a drilled and tapped receiver for optics. So for turkey hunting, or even slugs, if you want to use optics, or you want to use optics for whatever, you're good to go with the Weatherby Sorax. Very, very good ejection. Substantially more positive, more aggressive ejection than with the Benelli. And softer shooting. So, of the 3, believe it or not, the Sorax is the softest shooting gun with target loads. Slightly heavier gun, but not a lot. 6 1/4 pounds. The Benelli and the Fabarm are 6-pound class, just an extra. So finally, the Weatherby 18i Deluxe with a 26-inch barrel. Beautiful walnut stock. A lot of polish on that barrel. Highly polished blue. And also 6 1/4 pounds. Nice balance, nice weight. Let's see how that does. Very good ejection. Also soft shooting. I can't really tell much difference between this guy and the Sorax. I'll try to say this is not scientific. This is just my shoulder with a thin sweatshirt on. There's no extra padding here at all. Man, that's a very, very soft shooting gun. And now the Sorax one more time. See if I can tell the difference. Both very, I can't tell the difference. So whatever Weatherby is doing here with the recoil pad, they've done a good job. Recoil pad and stock design. You know, if you have a bit larger recoil pad that fits your shoulder pocket better, you're going to have less felt recoil because, of course, the thrust is spread over a larger area. So it's different. If you, a needle going to your arm is one thing, a catcher's mitt going into your arm, or going into your shoulder rather, is totally different. So it's important, I think, to have a recoil pad that fits your individual shoulder pocket. So, although everybody likes to test recoil with target loads, what we'll do is step it up, going from 7/8 ounce loads to 1 1/8 ounce. So in this case, we're going to go with 2 shots per gun. These are not super high recoil loads as far as humming loads, but they are 1 1/8 ounce, 1175 feet per second, number 4s. Remington Nitro Magnums. So I'll take 2 shots per gun, and I don't obviously have heavy hunting clothing on, but we'll see what the difference is. So, first go, Benelli M2. That's some stronger ejection. The holes are flying. Now we'll go with the Elos. Same load, 1.125 ounces. Yep. Elos is softer shooting than Benelli. No question about it. Next up, 1.125 ounce loads will be Sorax. Very, very strong ejection. And finally, with 1.125 ounce loads, the Weatherby 18i. According to my shoulder, the 18i is the softest shooting gun of the four with 1.125 ounce loads. Not by a huge amount versus the Weatherby Sorax. With the target loads, I couldn't tell the difference. So, how would I rate these guns? Actually, by now, I have hunted with all of them. I have hunted the most with this old Benelli M2, which is the highest recoil gun of the bunch, as far as I'm concerned. The pad, I guess, just isn't all that generous, and it is a light gun. But nevertheless, now with the extra strength mainspring, I have no problems with the reliability, with concerns about reliability. So as a hunting gun, this has done a good job for me for years. And yes, the loading is slightly stiff. There are other models that are more problematic, like the Franchi Affinity in 20 gauge can be a real thumb buster. So the loading is still just not that great. And the trigger, if I didn't mention it before, was excessively heavy when I got the new gun, but Benelli took care of that. But with the extra strength Wolf mainspring, it's going to solve a lot of problems for people plagued by the Benelli click, whether it's the Benelli or some other brand. Just a strong enough mainspring, and that may completely eliminate your problem. Because some of it is the idea is that if you set it down, a gun down harshly, it might come out of battery. And you can see by the way the bolt closes, pretty fast, pretty snappy. And if I shake the gun, there is no rattle. So it does not have the Benelli rattle bolt. And the rattle bolt, that's a problem. I think that's a big portion of how the Benelli click was developed. They just didn't test proper spring rates in the mainspring, and that has created problems. There are other guns, other inertia guns out there, a whole bunch of them by now. But for example, the Browning A5 12 gauge and 16 gauge, I've never heard of any Benelli clicks, even though that's a fairly conventional Bruno Civillani action. Not a problem there. So it seems like Browning did a better job with their mainsprings than Benelli. And there are other ones that have been disasters. The Rite in 20 gauge, a real jam-o-matic, just won't cycle target loads. So that was a real disappointment. The Rite 12 gauges are better, but the 20 gauges is a real mess. There's always a lot of discussion. What's the best hunting shotgun? Over and under, semi-auto, or even pump? And of course, there really is no answer. They all do a fine job in different conditions. What you would expect with an over and under is excellent barrel regulation. Fabarm, for example, tests every single target over and under that they sell for barrel regulation. You don't get that with cheap over and unders. It's just not possible. And of course, it's CIP proof tested. As a matter of fact, all 4 of these guns are CIP proof tested, which is the gold standard worldwide. Not only are they fired, they're inspected deeply prior to the firing, and of course afterwards. If you're just going to fire a proof load and call it good because the gun didn't break or come apart, that means nothing. So that's why they go through with luminous dye, similar to Zygo or Magnaflux, looking for little micro fissures in the barrel. May not mean that the gun comes apart immediately, but throughout its service life, which could be 50 years, 60 years, those little micro fissures and impurities in the metal can just grow, and they do. So it's a higher quality gun, directly put. That doesn't mean that the cheaper guns are unsafe, but fundamentally with safety, you don't assume it, you have to prove it. So there aren't that many problems with shotguns in the United States, even the cheap ones. Most of them just jam and fail. But a higher quality gun and better testing and higher reject rates, it just means a higher quality gun based on proof, not assumption or speculation. So Italian guns do have the edge in that regard. It doesn't mean that all Italian shotguns are great. It means that they're safe. They may not be good guns at all, but they're extremely well tested and proven to be safe. There's certainly differences between brands of shotguns. Anyway, one unusual feature about the Weatherby Sorax, already covered, is the reversible charging handle, which means there's a slit on the other side and you can change the charging handle from right hand to left hand, and the safety is also reversible. Weatherby didn't do that by accident because they were bored. They interviewed a lot of shooters, a lot of left-handed shooters, and the charging handle coming back at their face was distracting. Now obviously it's going to be more distracting with an oversized charging handle on a waterfowl gun, which the Sorax is, rather than a little thin pencil, short, dinky charging handle that you might find on upland models. So, some people think it's a huge help for left-handed shooters. Other left-handed shooters have been used to shooting right-handed guns all their lives, so it's no big deal. What I like about it is that if I'm going to give an inertia gun a quick clean, I can shoot my G96 or Rem Oil Cubed right here in the action, the rails, and any excess lube is just going to run out the other side. To me, that's important because I don't want crud and excess lube dripping over the shell elevator or the trigger guard. I want it out of the gun. So I prefer it myself, just for a quick cleaning, a quick irrigation. You're going to lubricate the parts you want to lubricate, and the stuff that you do not want oil on, the shell elevator, magazine tube, the trigger group, it's going to stay nice and clean and dry, which is the way it should be. That covers 4 different 20 gauges that I've hunted with and that I'll hunt with this year. This Weatherby 18i is going to get, obviously, a lot of use on wild pheasants. As far as point of impact, doesn't do any good if you're throwing out a beautiful pattern that's way high, way to the left, and that's the problem with Benellis. They obviously don't check them before they throw them in the box, and they don't have a fix. It's been going on for years. So shame on Benelli for that. They've really stuffed it up. It's supposed to be a premium brand, but those are defective guns. A gun that doesn't shoot anywhere close to where it's pointed, that's just absolutely ridiculous. So, in the old Benelli that I have here, let me grab the gun. In my older Benelli M2, the patterns are well centered. They are slightly high. Now the 60-40 pattern thing, that equates to about 3 inches at 40 yards. So it's really not that big a deal. But of the 4 guns, the only one that shoots high at all is this older Benelli M2. But it is perfectly acceptable. I've hunted with this gun for years. So the 3 inches isn't a big deal. If it shoots 8, 9, 10 inches high or high into the left, yeah, that is a gun that's garbage as far as I'm concerned. So the older Benelli M2s, after a few modifications, a little work, good hunting guns. Certainly lightweight and fast. The Fabarm Elos D2, this has an alloy receiver, box lock design, 4 beefy lugs. So it has a nice, firm, solid feeling, which is why people like over and unders, because there's a bare minimum of mechanical noise or things going on. Doesn't bother me one bit, but some people, if they're used to over and unders, they think that semi-autos are mechanical contraptions. And I guess they get distracted. I don't get distracted. I mean, if a pheasant cackles and hits the air, last thing I'm worried about is minor mechanical noise from a gun. But anyway, the Fabarm D2, like the Elos Elite 2, which has a steel receiver, both beautiful guns, and the barrel regulation is just dead on. It's been that way with all Fabarm guns that I've tested. And the tri-bore barrels are proof to 1630 bar. That's the highest civilian proof in the industry. And the choke tubes, these are tri-bore barrels, they're rated for steel all the way through 9/10, which is their full choke. Full, some would even call it extra full. So if you're using steel, not to worry with a Fabarm, because factory choke tubes are steel rated. With tungsten, you want to go with True Lock in the higher constrictions, as a turkey choke or something like that. True Lock makes Fabarm choke tubes. They're all extended, which Fabarm does not offer extended chokes in the 20 gauge. And all the True Lock chokes are tungsten rated. With tungsten, the company line from Fabarm is their 5/10, more or less what they refer to as the modified, is it for tungsten, nothing tighter. So I don't necessarily agree, but those are the rules according to Fabarm. Anyway, beautiful gun and a great weight, a great carry weight. I'm very, very impressed with the Weatherby Sorax. Like I said, this is a storm configuration. There is the Slough and there's the Midnight Marsh, which is a black one. I love the gun as is. I like how easy it is to disassemble and clean. The stock design is excellent. The recoil is very low. It's the Sorax and the 18i are the softest shooting guns that I have out here today. If there's a lot of interest, maybe I'll bring out another 4 or 5 different 20 gauges and compare. Actually, in this weight class, 6 1/4 pounds, my old Browning B80 alloy 20 gauge is 6 1/4 pounds, but it's gas operated, and yes, it is softer shooting than any of these. There is no question. But it's a gas gun, and it's hard to find high quality 20 gauge gas operated shotguns at that 6 1/4 pound weight these days. It's a shame, but anyway, 20 gauge is ignored in some segments. But the Sorax, I think is a great achievement by Weatherby, and 28-inch barrel is still very, very well balanced. I will love this gun even more when I can get my hands on a 24-inch barrel. But it sounds like it's going to be next year, next spring. But of the 20 gauges that have been announced for 2024, the Sorax is the only one that actually made it. The Browning A5 20 gauge that they've talked about since January of last year was supposed to be May and then September. Now, last I've heard, you can call Browning and ask yourself, maybe March, April of 2025. So it's vaporware. They haven't had any full production runs of it yet. So people ask me about it. It's like, yeah, I fired it on one of the handful of the initial prototypes, but I have not tested one. So they are light, but as far as how they pattern and all the details, I won't know until I get one here, and I don't expect one until probably spring. I keep nagging them, but there's just no answer on what's taking so long for the A5 20 gauge. The A5, I think, has been around, I don't know, 8-9 years by now. A long time. You can double check me on that. But it took them a long time to get around with the 20 gauge, but it's not a reality yet. And finally, the Weatherby 18i. Of the semi-autos, as far as traditional looks, good wood, easily the best looking one of the bunch. And here I was talking about charging handles. You do have a smaller charging handle. This would be more appropriate on an upland gun. I do like this 18i. Perhaps the name just doesn't roll off the tongue. It doesn't grip people. So I think Weatherby has sold more Soraxes in the first few months of their introduction than they have in a year or 2 years of the 18i. I guess the 18i is people just doesn't grab people, but Sorax is obviously a more distinctive attention-grabbing name. So what's in a name? I think it has something to do with it. But I really do like this 18i. If anything, it's a sleeper. I like the checkering. The balance is superb. You can get it with a 26-inch barrel. The only modification here is that it came with an oversized red tubular bead, which meant that the gun, as supplied, shot low. It's just a shorter barrel. You need a smaller bead. So that was replaced with a smaller brass bead, and that brought up the point of impact 2 or 3 inches. So this thing shoots dead on. And they all do, except for slightly high on the Benelli, but certainly not a stopper. And the patterns on all 3 of these are well centered, which is just as important. If it's not going to go exactly where you point it, well, a couple inches high is okay, but you don't want them 5-6 inches to the left, or a pattern that's 5 or 6 inches to the right. Birds don't know that your gun doesn't shoot straight. So that is a quick look. One thing I like about all these guns is the safeties. Back of the trigger guard and easy to get off. I also appreciate, even though there is plastic on all these semi-autos, some more than others, Weatherby doesn't have any visible mold lines. See how nice and clean this is? And the same thing with the Sorax. There are mold lines, of course, but they're on the inside. They're not visible. And there are so many fairly expensive guns that have horrible, cheap, visible mold lines. It just makes the whole gun look rinky-dink tinker toy. So finally, why would you choose an over and under versus a semi-auto? They both work great. Is an over and under more reliable and more durable? The good over and unders are, not the cheap Turkish over and unders, but a high quality over and under certainly is. And you can expect, with the metal box lock, you can expect crisper triggers. Good over and under is going to give you really good triggers that you just can't get on a plastic trigger block semi-auto. So the triggers are a big deal. As far as capacity, I would say yes. For me personally, on a busy dove field or duck blind or goose pit where you can just feed shells in from the bottom, a semi-auto for me is better. For pheasant hunting, no. I mean, not so much. 2 shots, if that gets you 2 roosters, fine. There may be a few instances in a year where you can use that 3rd shot, but it's very, very rare. So the 3-shot capacity, a bigger advantage, I think, in the duck blind or a busy dove field. Upland hunting, not so much. But you know yourself, whether you say, hey, I could have used that 3rd shot. There's a lot of situations, even pheasant hunting, where that's happened. I'll give you an example. So with the limiter in, it's 1 shot in the chamber, 1 shell in the chamber, 2 shells in the magazine. So I'm hunting, and let's say a wild pheasant gets up, and rather than 1 shot, let's say I expend 2 shots. Safety goes back on. I'm looking for the bird. While I'm looking for the bird, another rooster gets up. So without screwing around, without messing, it's just take the safety off, whack rooster number 2. No reloading, no nothing. So there's a scenario where that 3rd shot puts another rooster in the sack for you. But everybody hunts under different conditions, has their different ideas. So that is enough of a minor comparison. The main surprise to me of all this is how soft shooting these Weatherbys are for inertia guns. I don't know what the secret sauce is. 6 1/4 pounds, but a recoil pad has a lot to do with it. You know, a recoil pad that gives you instant collapse, that can give you essentially a double kick. It collapses, there's excessive gun movement, and then you get another bump at the end. And of course the ones that are rock hard, they're like no recoil pads at all. It's just a vinyl crucifix. They don't do anything except poke you. So whatever this recoil pad is that Weatherby's using, even though it doesn't look like a monster pad, it's an attractive, well-fitted pad, it really does the job. So that's it. Hope everybody has a great season. Seasons are underway some places. Here in Northern Illinois, we've got 2 weeks to go. And if there's interest in this video, then I'll grab another 4, 5, or 6 20 gauges, different models and different brands, and run through the same routine. That's it. Have a great season. We'll see you later.